John?
Yeah, very well said. I think there's often an otherness or separateness, and I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about the individual with a disability as object, but a separation from the person who is inspired by the individual with the disability. And it's that there but for the grace of God mentality that makes me, when I see those stories, feel like the object of inspiration uh, is less worthy, less than the person who is actually inspired by that. So it's exploitive. I think let's just call it what it is. That's my strong feeling.
So just a quick follow-up for Carissa, Bev, or John, or any of the panel members. Are there situations where we as disabled people can be genuinely inspirational to other disabled people or non-disabled people, where it's not inspiration porn, but it's actually legitimate inspiration? Like, can you think of an example where the inspiration is not necessarily a bad thing?
Sure, if we do something extraordinary, we're a concert pianist or a wonderful athlete or whatever, that's something that you might say of anyone that they're an inspiration. It's not singling out the disability.
Maybe I'm like off, maybe I'm completely off on this. So if I do, forgive me. But I hate how when, or not hate, but I don't like it when like some random person will see me and don't even know me, and they'll say, "Oh, you're an inspiration." And as much as I like being an inspiration, but why? I'm just doing what everyone else is doing, and that's living my life. And the only way I know how to do that is to move forward. My disability isn't going anywhere, and so I accept it and I do the best I can with what I got.
Carissa?
I think we can all be inspired by Keith's list, number one. And number two, I love what you said, Morgan, about they're inspired by you, but they don't even know you as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if I'm an inspiration, I want it to be for something I do, not for just living life with a disability. Like,
Absolutely.
mm-hmm.
Don't be inspired by me getting up in the morning and doing what every single other person does.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When the mediocrity of people with disabilities is just as unremarkable as the mediocrity of people without disabilities, I think we will have arrived as a community.
Sounds good, John. I see a question in the chat from Aaron Fitzgerald that I thought might be a fun one to work into the mix here. Aaron says, question for panelists about less visible disabilities. How do you balance disability pride, being open and visible about your disabilities, with privacy / hesitation to invite all people into aspects of your life and identity? What is the line between choosing when, where, what, to whom to disclose, and being not visible open enough by some people's standards? Keith, did you want to start?
Yeah, so for me, now there is no line. I'm open and with everyone everywhere about my disabilities. My mental health is not a secret at work or with anyone else. My physical disabilities are visible. My chronic pain is not necessarily visible. But I do talk about it sometimes. And I just, there's something about bringing your whole self to everywhere you go. And as Andy mentioned earlier, I am a supervisor where I work, and I am open about my disabilities. And I do believe that my team is more open with me about the things going on in their lives, be it disabilities or other things, because I show that side of me, that I bring my whole self to work. And one of the side effects of my anxiety, when I have a bad anxiety attack, I get a migraine, horrible, just full body. And so sometimes I have to miss work. But, I'll let people know, hey, listen, I'm not in today, whatever. I'm having a migraine. I can't not bring my whole self anymore. And I think, it comes with the idea that as an individual, we get so much programming from the outside about how disabled people are supposed to act and be and feel. It just, I guess I don't have time for any of that anymore. So I just want to be me. Take me as you can. I'm okay with my disabilities. They suck sometimes, like I think Carissa said. It's not every day is in the park, but I understand them and I accommodate them in my own ways, and I expect society around me to also accommodate them. And it comes down to some really things that smarter people than I have thought about with different models of disability. And we as a society are still so stuck in the medical model that we want to fix the disabled person, right? We want to make, every time I go and get a new ankle foot orthotic AFO, I have to explain that my goal is not to walk like everyone else. My goal is to not have pain and have the most stamina I can with that AFO, right? But their goal always from the offset is they want to make me walk like everyone else. I don't want that. I don't care about that. I need what I need to live my life, not to make everyone else around me comfortable about who I am.
Yeah, I think on the question of figuring out the balance of what to disclose, when to disclose, how to disclose, to me, that poem by Laura Hershey, "If You Get Proud by Practicing," is very relevant. I think what I've experienced is sometimes when people start disclosing, they want to give their whole medical history, even if there's really no reason to do that. So I think it's worth thinking about, why are you disclosing? What do you want the other person to know about you and your disability? Sometimes it's to get an accommodation. Sometimes it's to create a connection, a deeper connection with another person, to use your lived experience to give you a credential that might make people hear you in a different way. But I think it's good to think about what is the outcome I'm trying to get by disclosing. And sometimes for me, the outcome is to make it easier for other people to disclose. I have a lot of structural power and privilege. And if I'm out and open with my disability, sometimes it just makes a safer space for other people. But I do think, like, that question about how much do you disclose, when, it's a good question, and we all have to kind of figure that out for ourselves. I have people say, do you have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2? Sometimes I don't even know the difference. Like that part of my disability is not that interesting to me, but some people like to really get into the weeds. I don't know, Bev or Carissa or John or Morgan, anything you want to add to that?
I think only that we need to be careful not to be too critical of people who don't disclose, because we don't know the circumstances that might make it too dangerous. It might be risking their lives.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Or jobs or housing, or you absolutely, Bev. And I should have included that in what I said too, is, for me, I am able to do that. Not everyone is in that position to have their whole self there. due to safety and other reasons. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
I think it's up to us, though, where we can, to create those safe spaces and ensure, as my colleague at AECD, Liz Weintraub, would say, that she belongs, and that creates the safety. So that's about systems, that's about policies, that's about the environment and the culture of not just organizations in an employment context, but events as well that are being hosted. Do I feel welcome? Do I feel like I belong? Am I safe in this space? So
I'm gonna take another question from the chat. This one's from Zoe Hughes. For any panelist who wants to answer, do you find that people are surprised that you work in certain career fields or are able to hold higher positions with your disability? I work in healthcare, and despite the fact that I have both physical and mental disabilities, I find that people act surprised that I move and function at the same speed as my counterparts. I find that disclosing my disabilities helps my patients know that you can live a wonderful life with disability. Anyone want to take that?
I can jump in because I actually work in healthcare as well, Zoe. And when I went to my current job, I was, open about my disabilities at my previous employer. And when I went to the healthcare setting, I did have an internal dialogue of how much I was going to disclose in that setting. And I ended up deciding that, I would be open and honest about my disabilities, especially since I work in healthcare and in mental health. And if I can't be open about my own mental health, serving individuals with mental health diagnoses, then I don't know if I should be there. But knowing that, and also keeping in mind what Bev said earlier, healthcare is known to not be a very hospitable industry for people with disabilities. And I can tell you that when I first started and I was open about again, you can see my physical disabilities, but open about my mental health and my journey with that, there were a lot of people that said on the side to me, I'm surprised you talked about that here. I have this condition and I'm afraid to even bring it up. And those people are working in mental health. So that's the culture that we have in workplaces. And unfortunately, healthcare is something that we need some internal advocacy in, Zoe.
Anybody want to add anything to that question? John?
yeah, there were a number of times when I was working as a political appointee in the Obama administration where I would show up at an event to speak, and I would often just hang out in the back of the room or try to listen and observe and be a fly on the wall more than a participant. And I can't tell you the number of times that people approached me and would ask me questions and make assumptions based on my appearance and my severe disability, and were very surprised when I got up onto the stage and was the one talking. So some of that was in a research context, sometimes in a health context, healthcare context, but not always. So I think there are a lot of assumptions that are made. And it's up to us, as you said in your introductory comments, Andy, it's practicing, it's living your life, it's being visible and intentionally visible. That's going to dissuade those who have those preconceptions or assumptions and may not have the experience with people with disabilities.
one thing that I want to add is we've been talking about our disabilities as though they are static, but I remember hearing Irv Zola speak once. Irv Zola was a professor at Brandeis who was a pioneer in the area of disability studies. And I heard him speak once, and he said, the question is not, do you have a disability, but how many and in what combination? And I think his philosophy was that we all move in and out of various disabilities over the course of our lives. And sometimes we get very comfortable with one identity, but the new identity feels scary. Like if you get a cancer diagnosis, or you experience depression or anxiety for the first time, or you have a new physical disability and you're used to having a mental health disability. So I think that's just another thing to think about when we talk about disclosure and disability pride. Can we get comfortable with whatever life may bring us? And does pride in one area automatically spill over into another area, or the desire to disclose in one area, does it carry over into another area? And I appreciate Bev's point. There's no point in shaming people for not being out and open about all their disabilities. But I think it's also good for us to think about, why am I more comfortable talking about this identity than I am talking about that identity? And do I have some internalized shame? And is that something that I can work on? So the next question I had for the pre-arranged questions has to do with kind of generational differences around disability pride. My perception is that the ADA generation, the folks who've grown up in the wake of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or they're developed into adulthood in the wake of having a civil rights law, often have more of a disability identity as they enter the workforce and enter adulthood than maybe my generation or the previous generation. But I'm curious, do you all see generational differences in terms of levels of disability pride, disability identity, how comfortable people are being out and open in places like a work setting? Keith, I saw you nodding your head. I know you're probably waiting for other people to go first, but feel free.
So, as I get older, it's cliche to say the youth are our future, right? But they are. So I guess I'm a middle child. I was born before the ADA was passed, but have lived with it as law of the land for most of my life and all of my adult life. And I think that the younger generation is gonna be more. I see it, and especially, and I don't. Maybe Bev might want to talk on this, but like the autistic community, I love that group because they got some real smart young people coming out and leading the charge and challenging old norms that us old farts maybe grew up with. I apologize. I'm not, I am middle-aged now, so I can say that, I guess. I think there's going to be more disability pride with the younger groups and more identity. And I also think that the younger generations get intersectionality way better than the rest of us. And I really hope to see more of that because there have been so many times and I am a cis white male, so I'm not going to talk too much about intersectional identities. But so many individuals that I've spoken to over the years and friends I've had and still have spoken to how none of their identity communities have accepted them as their whole self. So, if you're disabled in the LGBT community, then there are going to be some barriers and the other way around too. So, you know, if you're disabled and queer, and then you might find some attitudinal barriers at the disability agencies, right? Same thing with race and all of that, you know, just because we each might have a marginalized identity doesn't mean that everyone's going to show up for everyone else the way I might want them to. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King is "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." You know, and so I really hope that they get it more right than we did.
Thanks, Keith. Any other thoughts on the generational evolution around disability pride?
I do think young folks, and especially younger folks from very diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds, are driving this disability justice movement. And yes, old white guys and women like some of us on this call, I do think came to our identities in a different way than the young folks of today have and are doing. And I think they have higher expectations. And the historical leadership of this broader disability community has not always been welcoming and embracing of those voices, and those voices have been absent from leadership tables. So I think that movement is not necessarily new, that disability justice as a phrase has been around for a while, but there is an energy there and a movement and higher expectations and greater accountability that all of us need to look at. The disability research that's been done is largely done on white men. There's some done on white women, and not that there's research that's completely devoid of color, but we need to do better. And government has acknowledged that. I think the leaders of this community have acknowledged that, and things are getting better, but that's largely being driven by younger folks. So, and that's a good thing.
Anything you want to add, Carissa or Bev or Morgan?
I agree with what Keith and John said, and it's a wonderful thing to see the way that younger people are taking part in self-advocacy. About 15 years ago, I worked with autistic teens, and almost every one of them hated themselves. They hated their autism. It made me really sad. And to start seeing these people that are coming up now, and they are out and loud and proud, and they're courageous in ways that I haven't been in years. And they're going to change the world because they won't take no for an answer. If I have one criticism, it would be that I do wish that people would look a little bit at the history of all of the self-advocacy movements, so we can stop trying to reinvent the wheel and making the same mistake that we've already made several times in the same circumstances. But overall, they rock.
Thank you, Bev. You know, John brought up research, and one thing that, and it makes sense because he used to be the head of the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research. But one thing that the current head of that institute has focused her research on is disability identity development. I think one of her theories is how we are as disabled people and how we are in our identities as disabled people can affect our career trajectory. So her research, this is Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt. She's a Biden appointee, the head of the National Institute. But her research really is in the context of vocational rehabilitation, if you're a vocational rehabilitation counselor trying to help a disabled person get a job, one of the things you need to learn how to do is assess how they are in their identity. Are they comfortable talking about their disability? Are they comfortable using their disability as a positive differentiator to help them get a job? And are they comfortable asking for accommodations at work? And her theory is that those are all things that people need to learn how to do to be successful or more successful in the workplace. And it's an area that's been understudied in the field of vocational rehabilitation. So I just think that's an interesting research area, and I'm hoping, other people are going to build on her research and think about that as vocational rehabilitation and other serving professions, think about how they can best serve folks with disabilities. I see a question from Stephanie Meredith in the chat. She says, what are some of the best ways that family and friends can be allies and promote disability pride without overstepping their bounds and claiming ownership?
The most important thing about being an ally is not to be a bystander when you see or hear someone saying something terrible about a disability. It's the ally's responsibility to step up and say, no, it's not like that. It's the ally's responsibility to tell people, don't talk over these people with disabilities, listen to them.
I would reiterate to listen to the people with disabilities. A good ally in any marginalized group takes lead from the individuals with that identity. Listen. I appreciate Andy's t-shirt because don't be afraid of the word disability. It's not a dirty word. It is disabled is a part of my identity. It's not a bad part, a good part. It is one of many facets of my life. I'm also a father. I'm a professional. I'm a husband. I love sci-fi, and yes, I have some disabilities as well. I think that's important. I think role models are important and representation are important. Media is getting a little better with representation. When I was growing up with club feet, the only person I knew of in the world that also had club feet was a figure skater. Do you think 10-year-old Keith, who wanted to be an astronaut, cared that a figure skater had the same condition as me? No. You know who else did though? Damon Wayans and Troy Aikman. And I would have loved to have known that those were two people that had the same identity as me. Now, I was lucky. I also have an uncle with that same condition. So I did have a real life person, but I think representation, showing up to events, and I really like this new idea of we don't just need allies, we need accomplices. We need people who will get in trouble, good trouble, as John Lewis said, get in good trouble with us.
Carissa?
And I would also like to add, don't have patience with me when I want to speak up for something. Bless family and some friends' hearts, but sometimes they get annoyed, like, here she goes again. She's got to go talk to that individual about what they did wrong or why this building isn't accessible. Why can't you just do what they say, or just go to that seat, or just leave it alone? If I don't speak up, who will? So take the lead and give me some patience.
I appreciate the question, and it can be really tricky, and it's a cop out to say it depends, but it really does. And to use parenting as an example, There are times when you as an ally need to be a leader. There are times when you need to walk alongside, and there are definitely times when you need to fall behind and to let your child or young adult or adult with a disability take the lead. So the listening piece is critical, but Andy mentioning Anjali Farber-Pratt's research, you're also critical in that identity of your family member as well. So have high expectations. That's the best thing you can do as an ally. Have high expectations for yourself and for your family member with a disability.
Well said. Morgan, anything you want to add?
Nope, all these hit the nail right on the head. So I have nothing for this one.
Yeah, I guess I would add a couple things to Stephanie's question. One, as your child with a disability is growing up, try to enable them to meet adults with similar disabilities and other disabilities and start to feel connection to this broader disability movement and disability community of adults, and encourage those relationships and encourage them to see what's possible for folks that have similar disabilities as they're navigating the world of employment or relationships or whatever they're navigating as adults, the faith community, etc. And then the other thing I'll say is a lot of parents are afraid to talk about their own disabilities because they think their disability is small in comparison to their child. And I think be open as a parent to the fact that you may acquire multiple disabilities, over the course of your adult life. And there's nothing wrong with talking about your own disabilities, and like your parent identity doesn't have to be your only identity or your primary identity. You also can be part of the disability community. And I think sometimes parents get stuck in the parent role and miss the opportunity to develop their own disability identity. I've met a number of parents who the kid gets diagnosed and then they realize maybe they have the same disability and then they get diagnosed after the kid. But sometimes it's hard for the parent to embrace the identity. Next question I have is, many people experience disability alongside other identities, and Keith talked about intersectionality, like their race, their gender identity, or their cultural heritage. How is disability identity similar or different compared to these other identities?
Okay, I'm going to try to stay in my own lane here. I can tell you that I've had people reject and even hate me because I'm queer. And nobody doubts me when I say that. If I tell you that people have rejected and hated me because I'm autistic, the response is very different. I've been told, oh, nobody hates people with autism. That's ridiculous. But many people do hate awkwardness, bluntness, random chirps and giggles, and even, believe it or not, pedantic speech. In either case, it's not the one who hits you with the slurs and mockery that you have to watch out for. It's people who will quietly judge that you are a little too out, a little too flamboyant. It's the people who reject you because you didn't know how to make small talk or avoid you because of the way you move. It's almost like if they don't put a name on it, it didn't happen. Or if it happened, it was for a good reason that had nothing to do with your innate differences. If you've ever avoided somebody for being weird or annoying, then you may have discriminated against somebody based on their different neurology. I know that I have done that. The difference between the two is, in this case, versus queer identity, is that it's a little harder to dress up prejudice against disabled people as a moral prerogative, but only a little bit.
Thank you, Bev.
I think, all of our experiences and struggles are very different. And as marginalized groups, our histories are very different. And I too am trying very hard to stay in my own lane here. But I will say what I see, what I perceive as similar with those other identities and disability is the progression of our struggle for our rights. And what I feel like is a natural consequence of that struggle for our rights, because when you're fighting for your rights as a person, then it's very hard to continue an internal dialogue that there's something wrong with you, or you're not okay, or you're not whole. And so I feel like, and you can look a little bit, and I'm definitely not a history buff, but if you look at the civil rights movement in the 60s and into the 70s, and then you got Black Pride, and you got Black is Beautiful, right? That is a straight affront to the idea that the color of someone's skin makes them inferior, right? Black is beautiful. That is something to say, right? And then you look at the LGBTQ community, and we're here, we're queer, get over it, right? That is an absolute affront to whether you're too flamboyant or whatever someone else says to you. It says, no, I'm me and I'm here, right? And I don't hate myself. I think there are great things about me. And so just like those groups have progressed in that way, I think the disability community is progressing in that way. And that's why I think earlier I said the youth are our future, right? Because those who came a little before me had a very tough uphill battle just to get some rights on the legal books. And not that it's all perfect out there now, but the direct result of saying there's nothing wrong with me is to start to see the good things in you. And so, I think that just as those other groups moved towards celebratory joy in their identities, the disability community, some of us on the panel are dragging the rest of them along with us, and that's okay, because it's not right for everyone all the time in their circumstances. But I do think this idea is going to grow as more people with disabilities stop looking at what their functional limitations are in a doctor's office, and more at the beautiful mosaic of people that make this community, and the cultures that we have, and the arts that we have, and the camaraderie that we can have.